Thank you for tuning in to this wonderful program with Karl Ove Knausgaard and Brandon Taylor. I'm Andrea Grossman, the founder of Writer's Block, and I'm so grateful to Skylight Books for inviting us to join today's event. Karl Ove's series, My Struggle, became a global literary phenomenon and a cultural one too. As far as we know, he spared nothing and no one and raised innumerable questions about the literary divide between public and private. Those books were disconcerting in their unsparing daily doses of truth. Karl Ove invited us to become voyeurs as he revealed the quotidian, the mundane, and the profound. In doing that, he invites us to deconstruct our own assumptions of identity as he picks apart his own bit by bit. If you missed those installments, his new novel, The Morning Star, is also told in the first person with his unmistakable voice and precise details that simply make up life. It's these details that we've learned to take for granted with his work, both the internal and the external. But this book, The Morning Star, is really very different from the Knausgaard we're used to and takes place on one summer night. Speaking of stars, Brandon Taylor's recent book, Real Life, made him a literary sensation as he explored racial and sexual identity with frankness and beauty. It turned up on every prestigious Best Book of the Year list. His new collection of linked stories, Filthy Animals, explores love, identity, and pain, and his writing is gorgeous. Skylight Books has all of these great Knausgaard and Taylor books available for you, and I'm so delighted to present Karl Ove Knausgaard and Brandon Taylor. Thanks so much.
Now. Hello, welcome to the Skylight Books virtual stage. We're so happy to be here with Writer's Block to celebrate the launch of The Morning Star by Karl Ove Knausgaard, and he's going to be in conversation with Brandon Taylor. Welcome, both of you, to the screen. I am going to let the two of you take it away. Thank you so much for being here, and I'm looking forward to this conversation.
Thanks, Maddie. I'm also very thrilled to be here. I'm a tremendous fan, Karl Ove. I'm such a fan. And when the opportunity came to talk to you about this brilliant new tome of yours, I said, "Are you joking?" Yes, immediately.
I'm very flattered. Thank you. I'm a bit embarrassed.
Oh, well, don't be. It's a great book. It's so deeply strange. It's such a weird book. And yet, I was telling Maddie earlier, I was like, I don't know what I thought it would be like when Knausgaard took on a genre premise, but like somehow this book is exactly that. It's exactly what one would expect. It's so good and unsettling. I'd like to start by asking you, I guess maybe more of like a general or schematic question, and it's having to do with the scope of the novel. So the novel is, like many of your other books, quite long, and it sort of seems to encompass all of human existence, and yet at the same time, we encounter the characters in their smallest, most vulnerable moments. We seem to sort of follow them through the mundane upheavals of contemporary life. And it seems like in all of your books, there's this tension, this sort of paradox of a dual set of scales, both the cosmic and deeply existential, and also the deeply intimate and personal. So what is it about this tension that seems to compel you as a storyteller?
I don't know, but it's very precise what you're saying. It's exactly the place I'm seeking for. I think it's just a very basic experience of where do you find the big existential subjects? Where do you find life? Where do you find death? Well, it's here where we are in the mundane, and it was the same with My Struggle. It's kind of the same, but this is also very different because it's got many different characters, many different voices, many different conflicts, but they're all very grounded. They're all very much in the world somehow. And then I wanted some kind of arc going over it that was different, that was kind of bigger. And the difficulties is of course make these two movements merge and make them come together, and because they don't really in life, you know, you have ideas and you have thoughts and theories about everything, but you don't, it's not like you use them in your daily life, it's something else. And I found that very interesting, that our ideals, our views of the world doesn't really exist, or doesn't really show themselves other than in bits and pieces. And that dynamic I found incredibly interesting. I mean, you know, I love reading philosophy, for instance, and I don't get much of it. It's like a calming place to be, but it's that never takes into my day-to-day experience, just doesn't exist in that world. And this is also a book about different worlds, different views, that I kind of, the boundaries between them are normally very, very strict. In this book, they kind of dissolve and I start to move, and it's all kind of things, but you're very right. That's the kind of central theme in almost everything I'm writing, and I don't know why.
I mean, I feel like that is, I feel like it's, when I read your books, I do have a similar feeling of when I read philosophy, or like this summer, I undertook this ridiculous project to read all of Freud, and I would
project.
It was a wacky but really illuminating. But there would be these moments where I would be like, oh, that is something true about my life embedded in these, like, this very dense and rich text. And it's like, you know, it's like the same way that when you describe a mountain in your works, you're like, oh, it's like a sudden encounter with this like deep, true, fundamental eruption of meaning in the world. And then you sort of go about your life. And so meaning seems to be like these large topographical features of a landscape that we're moving through at all times. And sometimes we encounter them, but for the most part, we're just too lost in the forest.
Yeah.
I do want to ask you about, as you alluded to, this book is, unlike My Struggle, this book is comprised, it's comprised of so many different voices and so many different narrators. We've got men, we've got women, we've got teenagers, we've got journalists and doctors. You know, you sort of cover this broad range of people in society. And I guess and they're all in the first person. I guess I wonder, was the book always this sort of chorus of first person voices? Was that always what you knew that you wanted this book to be?
Yeah, that was the first thing I knew about this book, was that I wanted a choir. I wanted many different voices. And in the end, it isn't that many, it's only 9. Yeah. But you know, I imagine kind of even broader. But yeah, I like that. I like that feeling of trying. That's kind of the goal or the aim of writing, is to get a choir of human voices, and the interactions and the not interactions and the misunderstandings and all the restrictions and everything that is in between. Because in My Struggle, I wrote that everything that's inside, you know, just like the world inside. But here it's the world inside, and then another world inside, and another world inside, and I found, yeah, that was the basic. That 2 ideas. It was many voices and a new star in the sky.
Wow, so that's kind of extraordinary that I mean, because when I think about like the sort of level of difficulty of things to write, this sort of like polyphonic, multi-voiced choir in first person, and everybody is very different. Like that to me seems like one of the more difficult.
Yeah, no, it is. And it's all written in my language. And the problem is, of course, do you believe in it? Do you think it? You know, it's the last thing I want the reader to think, oh, that's, you know, that's the author, that's also on variations. So I did discuss that a lot with my editor, if I, you know, should change the language more, but I decided no, I do it in the same language and kind of make the characters different anyway. So in the ways of thinking and in the ways of looking, and of course they're all me somehow, and that's the beauty of fiction, you know. Yeah. You know yourself.
Yeah. Yeah. A friend of mine said something about Sebald once, which is that it's funny how all the people in Sebald's novels all sound like Sebald. You know, like they all.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
They all
Yeah,
have this sort of like very, I mean, they all have access to his incredibly rich and dexterous language. And
yeah,
the differences are in, I think the differences are there if you like look closely enough, but they're not there necessarily the textures or the rhythms of the, the language.
yeah. So the real solution would have been to done it third person, you know, with someone who
Mm.
can go in and out on the characters. But I really wanted you know, single place to see the world from, because that's what we do, all of us. And so that was kind of important. And then I'm really bad at writing in third person. I don't know how to do it.
I feel like we're the opposite. I have no idea how to write fiction in first person. I'm like,
Okay.
who is this I don't know what's going on. But the first person in your hands, especially in this book, it does seem to operate sometimes like a third person narrator, because we get the characters, and the characters are often telling themselves a story about themselves
Yeah, no.
in some sense, or they're sort of
Yeah,
thinking very deeply about someone they're looking at. And so there is this incredible dynamic range in your narrators that I found endlessly fascinating. And also it seemed to me like there would be these great tension points in the novel where a character would have like one active illusion about who they are and what they're doing. I'm thinking of Arna, the first one we meet, and he's got these ideas about who he is as a person and all this other stuff. And then the reader is watching him do all these horrible things, like erupt at his family and be a very cranky member of his family and all this other stuff. And so
yeah,
there's like this level of irony that
yeah,
seems to be functioning at all times within the first person narrators.
yeah. That's true. Irony is the right word. Not irony in the opposite, but irony in distance.
Mhm.
Even when I'm writing about myself, of course, it is that kind of, it has to be that kind of distance. So you are seeing the character from outside and from inside, more or
Mhm.
less at the same time, I think.
Yeah, and I think that it works. I mean, I think it works especially well in a novel like this, which is so much about the contemporary condition, because I feel like in the sort of contemporary moment, we're all so well referenced now that we always have these sort of functioning illusions and fake ideas about who we are and like how we're appearing to others. And with like social medias, like even with Zoom, you're sort of watching a person, but like you're really watching yourself at the same time.
Yeah.
It is a terrifying, ironic age we live in. I want to ask you about I guess the second main thing that you had in mind when you set out to write the book, and that is the star itself, which functions as a kind of unifying principle. All the sort of characters are witnessing it come into being, and it's sort of the thing that we track across the book. And the star also seems to unleash some kind of uncanny force in the world of the
Yeah.
novel. And I will say though that like even before the star is like fully present in the even before the star is observed, I'll say, there is something quite uncanny happening in the novel. Like you could feel something was coming even before the star begins to pulsate in the night sky. And I wonder, like, what is it about the uncanny that made you think like that is the thing that I want to sort of suffuse the book, this feeling of something dangerous or something hiding just beneath the surface of ordinary life?
Yeah. No, that's kind of many things, I think. One thing is to see something that you simply don't understand.
Mm.
That is very threatening, because we do understand everything and we know about everything and we have systems for everything. But if you know, if you see something you don't understand, or some creature that's not human and not animal or something, that is incredibly uncanny. Yeah.
Yeah, and it seems, I think things feel more uncanny the closer they are to something we do understand in some sense. And so, like a star, it's like, oh, yes, a star, we all understand stars. Even from a young age, we understand stars. Our
Yeah.
ancestors have been looking at the stars for millennia. But then there's something about the idea of like a new star, like something that appears in a very familiar sort of landscape that seems to denature everything about
Yeah.
life, and the characters seem to behave in ways that are so strange. And I think it begins with animals in the book. Like first they notice that the animals are behaving in ways that are quite unusual. And then they start to see things like the very strange bird-like creatures that seem to be flying through the sky. And then it's, things that are very commonplace. I think about the crow who first appears as a sign to a character who's seeking a religious sign. And then he starts to hear the very strange bird calls from the woods, and he doesn't know if it's real or if it's imagined. And I think a few characters in the book struggle to differentiate between what is real and what is imagined. And that to me also feels like a deeply uncanny space.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's right. It's, it's a thing that's out there and that's in the book, and it could be or represents all kind of things. It's something new or something is changing. And the thing was that when I wrote 2/3 of this book in lockdown in London, and after writing the book, I realized, it's kind of the same structure. We were in the house, could go out, very family life, and then you have the threat outside that was new and that we didn't know how to handle, didn't know what really was going on, and it's kind of the same structure there in a way. And then you have also, the morning star, that's Lucifer, that's the devil, that's the fallen angel. But you have also Lucifer as a name of Jesus, which is the opposite. And the thing that I realized when I wrote the book was that in the Bible, both the fallen angel and Jesus is sons of God. So there is a very kind of ambivalence to it. But the thing is, it's a lot of things are kind of gathered there, but it also is something is starting to happening. So it's kind of indicates that this is a kind of a change. But it's, I didn't think much of that when I wrote it. I just liked the idea of something unheard of, because I've never really seen anything new that hasn't been there before. And in science, things has to be repeated to have a value or to exist, And then if something just happened once, it's like it doesn't happen. So yeah, that's the things that are going on in the novel. But kind of the whole novel takes place on the ground, and this is kind of bits and pieces up there sometimes. And I meant really to open a room somehow, and to see what happens there.
Yeah. It's incredible. I think one of the characters in the book, when they're asked about the new star, I love the sort of casual nonchalance one of the characters has, where they're like, well, it's a new star. Certainly there are always new stars. Like where else would they come from?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And I was like, yeah, that's kind of true. I guess I never thought of it. Because we imagine them to be like eternal things that, never ever fade. And we imagine the span of a human life to be so insignificant when compared to the, the lifespans of the mountains or the oceans or the stars or the sky. And one of the characters is like very blithely like, stars have to happen sometime. Like, why not now? Why not?
Yeah.
Oh, it's just so delightful. I want to ask next about, I guess, about research, because this book and many of your other books are, sometimes you turn the page and you just drop down into like a 10-page essay on some very esoteric fragment from a text or a novel or the Bible that I'd never even considered. And this book is so seamed with references and allusions to literature and philosophy and science and art. And I wonder about the role of research when you're writing a novel like this. Is it, you're finding things as you move through the world and they sort of are compiled by your mind, and then you find the right thing for a character to say or do? Or is it a case of like things inspire you to sort of write about them?
It's two different ways of working. One is that I read a lot, and I do forget everything I read. So and then it kind of pops up when I'm writing about someone. and sometimes it's hard for me even to trace where it comes from. And the other thing is that through this book I read constantly, when the day was over, I was reading things that was relevant to this project, and kind of piled up a lot of direction and information. And there is a long essay in there about death, which is kind of, I read incredibly much about what do you call it in English? The afterlife, the death realm, the yeah. So yeah, and I know I've never done research in my life, but then never had there is a scene from there was an operation in a hospital where I really I have no idea. So then I contacted a doctor, and he talked me through, what would happen, and it had to be kind of precise. She's a operation nurse, and this patient has organ transplantation, so he's clinically dead and everything is fine, and then he wakes up during the operation, which is uncanny, and it is also related to the morning star somehow. That was great and really fun to do. And I realized, yeah, am I right? I can actually do that. And then there is a priest too. And I talked with the priest. And then I just wrote how I thought it would be. And then I sent it to her, and she kind of went through it and said, yeah, it's kind of, this is more or less the way, but they would have done this and that. And I know that's very common for writers, but I've never done research that way before. And it is very interesting. I mean, to know details about things that you never have dealt with in your life,
Yeah, I mean, in some sense, like the cast of characters for this novel is like one of those like bad jokes where it's like a priest and a doctor and a writer and a shipping heir all walk into a bar, and there's a terrifying, like, uncanny star in the sky.
Yeah.
You really do have this sort of interesting hodgepodge of characters. And I guess I wonder, did you know how they would all intersect at the start of the book, or did you just sort of
No, I didn't know
follow
anything.
them?
No. I started with just one of the characters, which is called Solveig, and she's the nurse, and just started to write about her. I didn't know anything about her, other than she was at the hospital, and then she's looking after her old mother at her house, and then her daughter, which is like 22, is coming home. So 3 women in the house, and that was that character. And then next I just started, man sitting in the garden drinking red wine, kind of drunk-ish, and he has 2 children, 2 twins, and so on. And then this friend's coming, his name is Egil, and I thought maybe, yeah, he can maybe use as a character, and then I write him. And then it's just it's whatever comes into my mind, really. And then when you have done that, it's like the page is, you have to follow the logic in the text, and then you have to try to make combinations and make them, and then things happens, and then that's how the novel is written, kind of accidentally, and just starting somewhere, and then pouring in my own experiences, the things I've heard and stuff, and then comes something, and then to me it's for real. Those people are for real, and that's a weird feeling, but fun. It's been the most fun book to write for me, maybe just because of that. There's so many characters, they're not me, and I have to find out where they're going, what they're thinking. There's a priest, she have just been to a seminar about translating the Bible, which I picked because I've been on a seminar translating the Bible. She's on the plane, and then she realized she don't want to go home. She doesn't want to go home, and that's that's the story, and that's okay. Then I'm writing about her, and it's the same way with all of them. So
wow, I mean, if you had asked me which of these sections came first, I would not have guessed that one. I would not have guessed that was where the novel began. Wow, that is blowing my mind. Wow, that's incredible. I mean, again, like, that just seems, as a writer, setting yourself like a next to impossible task. All of these first-person narrators, and how it all fits together.
Yeah, but the first person was so hard for me because she's a woman. I've never written about women before, and I spent months and months on trying to find on her to find her voice, and I restricted myself so much because I thought I can only write what I know a woman would think, which is a stupid place to start for a writer. But I was very restricted. It was like my hands was tied, and then I just had to say, let everything go, just write and go for it. And then the novel started. Then if you are careful and if you think too much, then there's no flow, and I need the flow.
Yeah.
Characters.
Yeah, I mean, I do feel like you're one of the great writers of flow. Like it's your books feel very sort of natural. But why are there motorcycles in New York City? But yes, your novels feel very in the flow, very natural, very fluid. And there is something kind of course, the book is like very like tightly structured and tightly connected, but part of what felt so compulsively readable to me was like, I didn't know what was going to happen next. I didn't know who was going to come next. And as the connections start to click into place, then there's another level of pleasure in the reading.
I think the reason I'm very happy that you're saying this, but I think the reason is that I didn't know. So when I write, I'm always at the same point as the reader in the text, what's going to happen now? I have no idea. So I think that curiosity kind of it must be in the text somewhere, because I'm very curious what will happen or whether we go with this book,
Yeah. I mean, it's you go to some truly startling places, and like people die in the book. Like things are brutal and strange, and they get darker as the book goes on. And you're totally right in that the book is full of surprise. And as a reader, nothing ever feels like foreordained in a sort of heavy-handed way. Like when you find a terrifying thing on page whatever, it's like, oh my God, like I did not see it coming. And yet, of course, it was always there. Like it there's something so natural about it all. I guess my next question is about meaning, which seems like a very sort of huge, terrifying thing. But, like reading this book, it occurred to me that this book feels very kind of old school in a kind of Stendhal or Tolstoy way. And it seems to me that in times that follow periods of great like upheaval, the first thing that we seem to do is to try to reinvent or rediscover like roots or pathways into meaning. And it got me thinking about the modernists and the postmodernists, and it got me thinking about Sartre and Camus and all these writers who were writing in the aftermath of periods of a lot of turmoil and upheaval, and they were trying to rediscover like what it means to have faith or meaning in the world. And this novel is also deeply preoccupied with faith and meaning in a way that many of your books seem to be. I feel like your books seem to consider faith a kind of dubious yet desired form of idealism, and your characters are never quite sure what to make of it. And so I guess I wonder, like, how do you approach the idea of faith and meaning in a sort of contemporary world? And was that something that you wanted to face head on in this book, or was it just something that seeped in like a sort of ambient anxiety?
No, it's a subject in the book. Yeah, it is. But it's not like I'm in my life. I don't think about these things much, or I'm not considering myself as a believer in any way. But I'm always drawn to those areas of life, which is kind of the most banal and most basic questions of all, and I have no context for it. I don't know, but I know only that I'm drawn towards it. And there is this. There are really two texts in the book that are very important for me personally, and both are by the Danish philosopher Søren Kierkegaard, which, by the way, is a fantastic character in himself. I just read a biography about him, and it was incredibly fascinating. And the thing with him, he writes so well. I mean, since I'm Norwegian, I can read him in his original language, and he's surely the best writer from Scandinavia ever. That's one thing. But he wrote Fear and Trembling, maybe his most famous text, which is about faith. And he also wrote a text that's called Lily on the Field, Bird in the Sky or something, which is a sermon. And they're very different, and they have a view of faith very differently. But in this novel, one of the characters is called Egil. He has a kind of experience of the divine in Norway in present time as something otherworldly, as something, he turns his back to society, turns his back to his children, turns his back to everything. And God is something out there, something, cosmic or something you can't understand, but it's very powerful to him. And then you have another Christian character, which is the priest, but her Christianity is almost the opposite. It's in between people. It's about mercy. It's about togetherness. It's about, she thinks God is, Jesus, is a radical figure if you really think what was going on and so on. So you have one inside the social sphere and one outside of it. And something I realized is Fear and Trembling. One of the basic story it's try to understand is Abraham wanting to, or commanded to, sacrifice his son Isaac, and that is, how is that possible and so on. What does that take? And in the end, he doesn't sacrifice him. And then I read a lot of kind of feminist theology when I was doing this, when I was working with this priest. And there is another story in the Bible never heard of even, where there is a man who promised God, if this happens, he would sacrifice his oldest child, and that's a girl, and he has to do it, and she is sacrificed. So you have one story that's kind of very important, and everybody knows it, and then you have another one which is basically the same, but no one has heard about. So that polarity is in the novel, and there's a lot of things like that the novel discovers, because I didn't know it before. It was just. But I don't know the relevance. I don't know relevance to our time. I don't know relevance to me. I don't know relevance, but it's like it's the book that's thinking. So I just go with it and see what happens and see what it is.
Yeah, but that's one of the great pleasures of the book, is its ability to sort of go seemingly far afield of what would be the sort of ostensible focus, which should be, in every other novel, would be the sort of morning star in the sky. Like that would be the thing that governed any other book. But this book sort of roams far afield, and it follows the characters into these incredibly moving crises of faith, and not just in a religious sense, but like their faith in God, or like their faith in the idea of family, or their faith in their creative work, or their faith in their scholarship, or like their faith in themselves, and all this other stuff. Like all of these characters are in these different crises of what it means to be alive and for our life to have meaning. And the book doesn't elevate any crisis over another, but it's saying like, these people are all lost, these people are all lost in some way. And what's so moving about the book is that we find them all. We sort of sit with them, and they're sort of lost in the woods, and we move on to the next one and the next and the next. And the cumulative effect is that it is this incredible panoramic of our contemporary moment without anything feeling too forced or sort of imposed upon them. We're just watching people grapple with, in some ways, like the eternal question. It's a siren. Yeah, the sort of eternal question, which is like, what is it to be alive? And that to me seems like a terrifying question to take on in a novel.
Yeah.
So how and why? Why are you so compelled by this question of what does it mean to be alive?
Well, I can't really answer that. I don't know, but that is, in everything I read, in everything I'm looking for, in everything, that's what it is about for me. That's what I'm, I don't know. It's I can't really explain why. I mean, I think, you know, doesn't everyone? Yeah, I think so. But maybe, yeah, I think, I don't know. Sorry.
No, I mean, I think the answer is probably that there is no answer. You know, the sort of
Yeah,
the answer is in the asking, probably, right? I mean, I think
yeah,
about that moment where the priest is, you know, she's gotten home and she's wandering the street and she's so overwhelmed, and she drops to her knees and she's like, God, I'm in crisis. You know, that
yeah,
moment of, and I do think that there are all these moments in the Bible where a character, or like a person in the Bible just will sort of say, I am in crisis. You know, there are all these moments in the Bible where a person is asking, you know, for anything,
yeah.
and they don't even know what they're asking for. They just need a sign. And I feel somehow that is what, I mean, like, that's what great art does, is it sort of recreates that feeling of asking the sort of great wide cosmos and not knowing what you're going to get in return.
No, exactly.
I guess my final question is, it has to do with, and we've maybe answered this obliquely, but it has to do with genre and form. So the book is full of homages and references to different genres. So there's, of course, suspense. There's some moments where I feel like I was watching a really great, like, Scandinavian noir TV show in some parts. You know, it's got detective, it's got hard-boiled mystery, it's got horror, it's got suspense and supernatural. And I guess I wonder about the role of genre in the work, and what was it about bringing those elements into the story that appealed to you? Or was it just, I wanted to put a weird thing in the book and see how it destabilized orderly life?
Mm. So there is a kind of a center in the book that I knew of from the very beginning, and there is a killing in the forest outside of the city, with 3 young members of a death metal band are kind of mutilated and killed in the most brutal way, like a slaughter. And there is one of them that is on the loose. He just has run away, and he's kind of running through the book, through almost all of the chapter. He is somehow running, and I knew about that, and I didn't know how to deal with it because I never written anything like that at all. So I just took what was available. That was a police scene. That was a journalist who's trying to get there, and that journalist in himself is a very fun character for me. It's a cultural journalist who really hates culture. He wants to be a crime writer, and he gets this case, you know. So there's a bit of comedy in there. But then why I did it, when I grew up, I read so many, you know, crime novels, spy novels. I read everything, and I think it's in me. So when I came there, it was just, I thought it was, can I do this? Yeah, I'm allowed to do this. Yeah, I can do it. And it was just fun, you know. And the other things, the horror things, and that was much more. The book I had in the back of my mind when I started to write this was one of my all-time favorite books with it, which is Dracula, which I read when I was like 14 and 16 and 18 and 20. I really love that book, and yeah, something of that is in there. But I do think my strategy of writing is to read a lot and to forget everything, and then write, and it comes out kind of misshaped or different forms. But especially a thing like, you know, pace or suspense, or I think that's what, if it's there, it's because of all the books I read when I was younger, you know. So it's just like a rhythmic thing, instinctive thing. It's like playing, you know. So there's no plan. I didn't want to write a genre book, but I did.
Yeah, it's inflected. It's like an admixture, right? Like, it just sort of comes out as this alloy of all the different influences you've sucked up, and it does feel like a deeply ruminative literary book, but it is suffused with all of these really great, all these really great things that make genre so interesting. It feels like a deeply genre inflected, very ruminative book. And it made me think like, oh, I would love to read more of these kinds of books, these books that are so deeply influenced by what we consider genre elements, and yet they are the sort of quiet, deeply interior novels of ordinary life. And I was like, wow, this is such a perfect melding of the two things I love most in the world. Yeah, I mean, it's
you're very
fantastic.
generous, have to say.
Oh, well, I loved it. But I guess, no, I have one more question for you. And it is a question that has haunted me ever since I read this part of the book. But there's a young character in the book, which is not a thing I typically associate with you, except for in certain books, certain books of the My Struggle series when you are quite young. And I guess music is such an important part of your work, and this book is no different. Music is almost a character. It tells us so much about the characters who are in the book. And I was astonished to find mention of Ariana Grande and Billie Eilish in
Yeah,
in your book.
yeah.
Was that a part of your research? And if so, what was your favorite Ariana Grande song? I could not stop thinking about it. I was like, Karl Ove listen to Ariana Grande. What in the world? What, tell me all about it, please. Tell me about this.
Yeah, no, that's very I got daughters, and we drive car, and they play the songs in the car. So I kind of, it's almost like I grew up with Ariana Grande and Rihanna and all the things they listen to. And when I wrote this song, I asked them, what are you listening to? Billie Eilish, for instance, came up. And then I watched actually this is description of Ariana Grande video that she's making herself. She's like singing layer per layer per layer per layer. Yes. with it's great. And I thought I wanted to pour that enthusiasm into this girl who is the narrator. And I also started to listen to Queen, which is an odd thing because I listened to Queen when I was their age, but it's of course the film. So everybody in their age group listens to Queen, and that was great fun. And I actually made a playlist for every character. It is online, and they're growing, so it's like 40 songs for each now. And that is so fun. And it's you could take all the things that you do like, but you don't go public with it, and just put it out there in a character. So that I love that. And I always play music when I'm writing, and it gives so much more. I mean, the thing with her is that she has such a great voice, but she is also very ashamed of herself and hiding away. And then there is a scene where she's singing Coldplay, and it's like, it's just fun.
Oh, I love that so much. I've also seen that video of Ariana Grande singing all those songs, and the idea that you were also amazed by it, incredible.
Yeah, no, yeah.
Oh, yeah, no, she's a generational talent. But I mean, the way that you use music, I mean, sometimes you read a novel with music in it and it's like, oh, these like soaring lyrical descriptions and yada, yada, yada. But the way that your characters have thoughts and opinions about music, and music is a part of their intellectual life, it's a part of their creative life, their spiritual life, and it feels like a way of getting to know them and getting close to them by understanding their thoughts about music. And I always am looking for what your characters are talking about, the music they love, the books they love. And it's like a deeply felt way of characterizing people in a book. And maybe that's a little old fashioned, but I really loved it. And so when I saw Billie Eilish and Ariana Grande, I was like, I know exactly who this character is.
Yeah, no, it's no, one of the characters is in a band, and then I had to make a song that he's making, song text, which was fun, but it has to be bad in a way too. And he's working with children in a nursery, and he's playing them great music. They're like 2 and 3 years old, and he plays in that scene, he's playing Father John Misty, and he's playing Kraftwerk, and he's playing, and they love it. And it's true, children can relate to complicated music, but not too complicated literature, but they're kind of just loving it. So Yeah, I remember my kids when they were like 2, 3 really liked Kraftwerk, the German.
Yes.
Yeah, So that's yeah, that was just fun, and
Oh.
it's really makes it more real, I think, to have
Mhm.
music put in, because you don't know.
Yeah, it's a point of reference. I mean, I think in a
Yeah,
world
exactly.
where the sort of the idea of like a common culture has like, gone away, I feel that music has continued to be one of those common touch points, and it's a
Yeah.
point of reference, and you can go all over the world and mention like Michael Jackson or Kraftwerk or Queen, and people know, they're like, oh yes, I love Queen, and you have nothing else in common
Yeah, exactly.
but the music.
No. Yeah, no, that's great. That's true.
I think now is audience questions. Is that right, Maddie?
Yes. Brandon, thank you so much for your wonderful questions. You're my favorite question asker.
Thank you very much. It was very generous, I have to say.
Oh, it was I love the book. I love all your books, but this book especially, I was like, wow, I love this so deeply.
All right, so let's take some audience questions. So these were sent to us in advance. Thank you so much to our audience members who sent these in. So we just have a couple, and then before we all go, I want to just see, Brandon, if you have any last questions, and maybe we'll do like a short little reading, perhaps. All right, so first question. I'm curious about your audacity to write and your unwavering effort to write when it seems there were many years when it didn't flow or you felt that you weren't competent enough. What has motivated you or gotten you through obstacles to completing each work?
That's a good question. Oh, it's such a long story, and it's the kind of different, for each book. It was so long that I just couldn't write for so many years, and I really, really wanted to write, and I read a lot, and I really wanted to kind of to go in there and to just be free in there, and I couldn't. And then I met an editor who somehow believed in me. He just saw some like 10 pages I wrote or something, and that trust was, then I could write for some reason, and I wrote my first novel, and then I couldn't write, and then it took me 5 years to finish the next novel. And what I did then, because then I had one book out, I knew, I have one book published, I can call myself a writer. I knew, and I wanted to find that place again. And then I just sat and wrote every day, no matter how bad it was. And so the thing was to tolerate my own bad writing, to tolerate everything that was bad, and just to be there. And then after 5 years, there was another novel. And then it was 5 more years with the same process, just sitting there doing it every day. And the thing I learned about my struggle was, if you lower the threshold, then it's easy to write. So that's what I'm doing all the time. I'm lowering the threshold. I'm saying, no matter how bad this is, it's a novel, and I'm writing it. And then if you become free, and then things happen, and then it's not bad, but it doesn't have to be really good. But it's just kind of just sit down and write. That's what I do, and with try to have no pressure.
All right, thank you. Hallie, I think you have a question. Take it away.
Yes, I just want to first thank you both for being here. This was such a wonderful conversation. Our second audience question is, how has your study of art impacted your writing? Is there an artwork or body of work that has served as a touchstone for this book?
Oh, that's a good question. Art means a lot to me. I'm looking at art almost all the time. Mostly art books, because there have been a lockdown and I haven't got to museums in the last 1.5 years, but I do look at it. And and I do it for a kind of weird form of inspiration, just to come something from it. And I think, how can I get there? How can I get into there? What is going on there? And it's a lot about, I don't know what it is really, but there is, in this book, there's no specific work of art, but there is an artist that she made a Norwegian cover, which is a painting by her. She's called Mamma Andersson. And these books, they're going to be more books. This is going to be a sequel to this book, and then she would be have the cover already made, and I went and saw her work, and it's really amazing, really, really great. And there is something there I do kind of reach for, but it's impossible to explain what it is. It's just something intuitive. But she is truly great.
Thank you. Okay, so this is a writing advice question. How do you encourage writing forward and writing extensively? Is it about having a plan, stamina, or what?
I know many writers, and I know every writer has their own things, and have learned their own lessons, have their own experiences, have not found their own way. And I think that's kind of a key. You just have to find your own way. For me, it has been stamina. There's no talent, it's stamina. It's just sitting there doing it, and waiting for a flow that maybe never happens, but that's what but I did get a great advice from a writer I once interviewed. He's one of my favorite writers. He's Norwegian. It's called Ture Eklund. And what he said basically is just accept everything of what you're doing, because it will become something, and it is something. And just be happy there is something. If you have problems with writing, well, sit down, write about having problems with writing, and something will come out of it, and but it's incredibly individual. So what helps me won't help you. I mean, it's yeah.
Thank you. All right, Brandon, do you have any last questions or last thoughts you want to share before we say our goodbyes?
Well, I mean, I have a million more. Please, I have a million more questions. But I first just want to echo what you just said. Like, yeah, I mean, the thing about writing is that sadly there's no secret. There's just you've got to just like find your own way, and you're never going to be able to be anyone else. And it's like really freeing, but also very depressing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, so true. I guess the immediate question I have is like a sequel. There's a sequel to
Yeah.
When have you already started? Have you what?
Yeah, well, I finished it on Thursday. So
congratulations.
Yeah, thank you. So it will be published in Norway actually this fall, in the end of the fall. It's very different, but it's more or less a prequel, and then the real sequel will come. So there's more coming.
2 more of these. I feel that you are maybe our great contemporary writer of sagas. I feel that you
No, but it's I can't finish a story. It takes so long for me to finish a story. So this story just started, and then work more about it.
Oh, well, can't wait. I may have to learn Norwegian so I won't have to wait quite so long. I will say that when I found out that this book was happening by Googling you, as I sometimes do, and I saw that it had been published in Norway previously. So I asked my ex-boyfriend, who is Swedish, to translate the title of the book and its sort of back matter and the review of it. And so yes, he was very kind enough to keep me abreast of all Knausgaard happenings in Scandinavia.
Wow.
All right. Well, this has been just wonderful, a blast, a joy. Karl Ove, would you like to close us out with a short reading?
Yeah, I can do that. Any suggestions? Yeah, just read the opening maybe, or?
Yeah, that would be great.
Yeah. Yeah, so this is the opening. It's very slow and simple. The sudden thought that the boys were asleep in their beds inside the house behind me while the darkness descended on the sea was so pleasant and peaceful that I wouldn't let go of it at first, but tried instead to sustain it and pin down what was good about it. We'd put the nets out a few hours earlier, so I imagined their hands still smelling of salt. There was no way they would have washed them without me telling them to. They like to make the transition between being awake and asleep as brief as possible. At any rate, they would pull off their clothes, get under the covers, and close their eyes without so much as switching the light off, as long as I didn't intervene with my calls for them to brush their teeth, wash their faces, fold their clothes up neatly on a chair. Tonight, I'd said nothing, and they had simply slipped into their beds like some long-limbed, smooth-skinned species of animal. But that wasn't what I felt so good about the thought. It had been the idea of the darkness falling independently of them, that they were sleeping as the light outside their rooms retreated from the trees and the forest floor to shimmer faintly for a short while in the sky, before it too darkened, and the only light left in the landscape came from the shining moon, spectral in its reflection on the surface of the bay. Yes, that was it. That nothing ever stopped, that everything only went on and on. Day became night, night became day, summer became autumn, autumn became winter, year followed year, and they were a part of it. At that very moment, as they lay sound asleep in their beds, as if the world were a room they visited. Sorry about the silly glasses.
That was amazing. That was so, oh.
Thank you so much. And know that our audience in the future is already clapping for you.
Thank you very much. Well, thank you for generosity and enthusiasm. It's really wonderful.
All right. Well,
okay.
I think we're all set. Karl
Okay.
Ove, thank you so much for your time. Brandon,
Thank you very much for having me.
It's been a pleasure.
Yeah,
Callie,
me
thank you
too.
for being here in the background.
For having
Thank
me.
you so much to our audience. We appreciate you all, and get your copy of The Morning Star now. All right.
Thanks, everybody. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.